Hello, welcome to WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle, Loyola's premier sports talk radio show, airing every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. and every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Welcome to another Monday edition of the show. I'm your host, Jeffrey Bozzi, alongside my co-host, Jimmy Cody, and we're delighted to have Andrew Ciafalo back in the studio. Guys, how are your Mondays going?
Well, so far so good for me. I did not have any class today. Disappointing because that was my last day of classes as a senior. So that stinks. That's definitely sad. And besides that, the weekend was interesting. What you guys think of Lollapalooza? I want to hear. Did you go, Jeffrey? What'd you think?
I did. I thought it was okay. I thought the atmosphere was pretty lively as expected. I thought Jeremiah was pretty good. I think he's not one of the more popular singers amongst the past singers that Lollapalooza has had. I do think he did a good job, but I don't know. I had like a decent time.
Andrew, how are you doing? And also, did you go to Lollapalooza? And if you did, what'd you thought? Or what'd you think?
Doing pretty good. Last day of classes, I had one of my knocked out one of my final exams today, but no comment on the Lollapalooza as to I did not go.
Okay, well, if you want my opinion, I'm gonna be honest. I thought he was mid. I didn't think he was that great.
I'm only gonna say positive stuff on the air. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh no, I'm criticizing his performance, not the selection. It was a fine selection. Like it was within their range. Like they can only do what they could do.
Right.
I thought his performance was
Yeah.
I did not think he was that good. Like I didn't look at this and like it was interesting though. I didn't realize he wrote some other songs.
Yes.
Like were pretty well known, like Unforgettable, like with French Montana and whatever the other guy's name was. And I was just surprised that I just didn't really know that, number one. And number two, he was kind of getting like heckled the whole time too. In the beginning.
Was.
Yeah, because he was playing stuff that was just not good and people just did not know. And I get it, it's his stuff, like he has a routine. But when you only have so many like good songs that people probably know the words to, I think you got to do a good job of like keeping them close to each other and also like expanding on them as much as you can.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. His performance was okay. As you say, it wasn't the best, it wasn't the worst. But
yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
I will
not
say,
the best, but not the worst.
Personally, I felt bad because I want to sing along. The problem was I just didn't know many of his songs.
Yeah.
Now, when he sung 2 or 3 of his more popular songs, the songs that I knew, I was singing along. It was a good time. And then, like you said, I didn't realize he wrote a lot of those other songs that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of cool that they mixed that in there. But overall, I thought it was okay.
Yeah, it was just okay, I guess.
Just okay.
No, his performance, like we don't blame the teams. Anyway, we're just talking about performance on the show, and I'm one to criticize the performance when I didn't think it lacked energy. I think he knew, hey, I'm getting a paycheck here. He just was doing what he was doing.
I agree.
It doesn't matter.
And the other thing too,
also what stinks is we only got to go to 2 because we
right. And I was going to mention something else that's related to that. We never got an outside performance either. We never had an outside Lollapalooza, which stinks for our grade, but hopefully the other grades can enjoy one next year.
Yeah, hopefully they can. Actually, maybe we should just come back and
might as well
claim what's ours. Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's get into some sports, shall we?
Yeah.
NBA action this weekend, and I thought it was pretty good, guys. I'm not gonna lie.
Yes, it was. We had a few series start in the second round, but we did have a first round series that concluded yesterday, and that was the Warriors and the Kings. The Warriors were on the road in Sacramento, and they had to win the game, obviously, to move on, and they did. And it wasn't easy early on. Sacramento was, I believe, up 2 at the half, and then Steph Curry happened. Yeah,
Steph Curry went off. And he drops 50. It's his new playoff career high, which actually, I know, like, in the grand scheme thing, that's 50 points. But I just feel like in playoff games, I've definitely seen Steph Curry go off so many other times that, like, it was kind of surprising that 50 was the highest. But at the same time, too, I wouldn't be surprised if he broke his own record sometime later this playoffs because, honestly, like, the rest of the offense is, like, I don't think playing at nearly as high of a level throughout this series or at any point during the series that he did in that game versus Sacramento, particularly game 7. I feel like without a doubt, like Steph Curry is the go-to guy, but I felt like there was a lot of times where like they know that they have some good other options like Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins, but those guys are not nearly on the level of Steph Curry. And realistically, if they're going to get to where they want to be, which is the championship, and they're going to be playing a very tough opponent in the second round now because they're going to be playing the Lakers, and that is going to be a great matchup. I just want to say I'm very excited for that one. But my point is, Curry's going to have to be the guy that carries them because he's the best player on the team, and honestly, he's the star of the team. Like whether people like believe it that way or not, I don't think the Warriors would be nearly as successful during this run if they didn't have Steph Curry. I think if you take away like a Klay Thompson and maybe like they had somebody else in there, I don't know, you could argue that they might still be just as successful, right? I think Steph Curry is the guy that's irreplaceable.
Yeah, I think yesterday he showed why he is Steph Curry and why he's this perennial all-star MVP caliber player. And I agree, Jimmy, with what you said about how they're not getting much help from the bench. I mean, Klay Thompson to start the game. Now, I know he finished the game with 16 points, but at the start in the first half, he was nowhere to be found. He was just being inefficient. And the same goes for Jordan Poole.
A lot of guys on their team
And Andrew
have
Wiggins.
been inefficient though. Like
And they got away with it in this round. Now, I don't think they would get away with it in the next round. As you said, they're playing the Lakers.
unless Curry can carry them. That's the truth at this point.
Right. And I think he can carry them. It's just you're not going to want him to have to drop 50 every night. I think you need Klay Thompson to get back to what he can do. And that's probably scoring in the 20s. And we know he can do that. It's just, I don't know. I think sometimes when the other guys are not playing well and you have to rely on Curry, I think you can do that sometimes, but you definitely don't want to do it all the time. And then for Sacramento, they were just getting killed on the boards yesterday. In the third quarter alone, they gave up 13 offensive rebounds. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's kind of something that will happen over the course of a game is like
And that's also the other thing.
they're
Sorry.
gonna get beat in some areas. And honestly, for Sacramento's case, the boards was that area. But I just felt like throughout this entire series, I just knew that the Warriors were the better team. So you can say, oh, the Kings could have done better here and there. I just felt like they didn't nearly have the skill that the Warriors ever had. They didn't have the talent that the Warriors ever had. And I just don't know if they were, even though they were might have been like the better team, like during the regular season, I don't think they were the better team, right? Like I think that was shown during the series.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I was going to mention, speaking of the rebounds, Kevon Looney had 21 rebounds.
Yeah, that's domination.
And considering that he's going up against Domantas Sabonis, who is one of the better rebounders in the NBA, I mean, that's very impressive. But like you said, Golden State, you can say what you want about how their season went, can't win on the road. They've had trouble on defense and all that. They found a way to get it done because I think the experience did prove to be the bigger factor in the end. And I think someone on Sacramento said it might have been Harrison Barnes or De'Aaron Fox or Domantas Sabonis. One of them said that the lights were just too bright and the team just could not perform under pressure.
Well, they shot just so poorly from three, too. That's the problem.
Right. And that's kind of how they
Especially
play.
when you look at how the Warriors did from three, right? Like they didn't do that great, but yeah, no, they didn't do that much better. Like they did a little bit better, but the Kings were so poor. And when you're poor in another area, in addition to the rebounds, like of course you're going to lose by 20 points. Like especially when you're even up at halftime, right?
Yeah, and the thing with the Kings, the way they play is they kind of ride or die by the three-pointer. And there's some games where the shots are dropping and they can really win a lot of games. Like you saw in the first two games, they're making a lot of shots, and that's why they got to 2-0 lead. But over as the course of the series went, they just could not make enough shots.
Yeah, that's the way it goes sometimes.
But nonetheless, for them, they had a great season. I mean, no one really saw them getting a 3 seed or winning 48 games. So I think to put themselves back in the map, it's definitely something they should be proud of.
Yeah, hopefully they can take a step forward next season. But the West is going to be very tough again next year. Nobody's really going away. It'll be interesting to see what teams like the Pelicans and the Trailblazers and the Mavericks, who didn't make the playoffs, what they do. It's going to be interesting to see the step that the Thunder take forward too. So, it's still going to be a lot of competition for Sacramento next year. I don't think they're a lot to necessarily make the playoffs next year.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
As crazy as that sounds, I agree.
Yeah, it's crazy as it sounds. Now let's talk about the other NBA game that took place yesterday between my New York Knicks and the Miami Heat and at Madison Square Garden. And the Heat end up winning by 7, 108-101. And it's disappointing as a Knicks fan because obviously I thought we could not lose home court, and that's exactly what we did in the first game.
Yeah, and it was actually very stunning to me because the Knicks come out, they have a very strong first quarter. Second quarter, they kind of let the Heat back in it, but
Yeah, second
overall,
quarter,
they
the
still
Heat-
were
the,
pretty
the,
much in control.
the second and third quarters were dominated by the Heat.
Yeah, I would say, especially the third quarter at the start, the Heat went on that run. I'm not exactly sure what the run was, but they got themselves back in the game. They eventually took the lead, and then they kind of just held on from there because the notable thing that came out of this game was Jimmy Butler, the star of the Heat. He was injured, and so his status is still kind of up in the air, but it's interesting because the way that this schedule is, he could rest tomorrow because the next game, game three, is not till Saturday.
Wow, that's a massive
So
gap.
the only reason I brought this up is because I was just watching this on First Take. They were saying, would you rather rest Jimmy Butler for game two or do you need him out there? And I don't know because you do have home court
It
now.
seems like they might rest him, honestly. I mean, I could totally see that, but I think it's going to ultimately come down to what Jimmy Butler decides or the doctors or whatever the Heat management decides. But it's interesting, especially when you consider the way that the Bucks operated with Giannis. It's like, you know, and the way the Clippers also operated with Kawhi. It's like we saw two completely different scenarios there where both teams ended up losing, but their players were hurt. And it's like you don't want to force them back in because in the case of the Clippers, that backfired against them completely. So it's definitely interesting to see what the Heat do. I would always err on the side of being conservative with my own team, but also at the same time, I'm the team who's playing against the Heat. So I do kind of want to see Jimmy Butler off the court, which is easy to understand.
No, that's definitely understandable to think that way. And for the Heat, if they do not have Butler tomorrow, I can still think you can go to other guys. I mean, we saw Gabe Vincent and Kyle Lowry make some shots yesterday. Now, I don't think they're going to be
Kyle
consistent
Lowry
scorers, but he actually showed up
18
yesterday.
whole points.
Yeah.
Good job, Kyle.
There are other guys in the Heat who can score, and I know that throughout the year they've been this subpar offensive team, but I think they do have a lot of shot makers, and if the shots are falling, they can beat anyone.
Yeah, but you know what else? They step up defensively. They did that in this game. They kind of gave the Knicks like a taste of their own medicine. Like these two teams are like fighting fire with fire. Both rely on their star players to get them over the hump, like their main few options on offense. And then the rest of the team is committed defensively as well as to the boards. Both these teams go very hard on the boards. And I think for a series like this, like these are going to be tough games. Like, this is like I would expect a lot of games like within this kind of scoring range here, like low hundreds.
I agree.
Maybe not. I mean, I would not be surprised.
They
if there's a
have
couple of
very
coaches-
similar styles, very similar cultures, the way they want to do things.
Yes.
I'll have to ask you because Julius Randle, he did not play yesterday. I don't know what his status is for game two or
I don't
going
either.
forward. Like, do you think the Knicks like badly need him out there?
Listen, I think we definitely took a step back on offense. That's for sure. Like Obi Toppin was pretty good in the starting lineup. He gave us 18 points. The problem is that we then get nothing from our bench. Like our only other big option off the bench is Isaiah Hartenstein, and he gave us 2 points, and he was out there for 14 minutes. Like it's just an offensive loss. Like I don't think necessarily Obi Toppin for Julius Randle. Like I trust both those guys. It's just that we're going to need scoring. Like we need it from the bench. So when somebody has to go to the bench, even if Randle, like if he's not 100% and he could just give us some minutes, I think that would benefit us. But obviously, too, I know at the same time, like if he's playing, he's probably going to be starting. And I don't know, Obi Toppin coming off the bench isn't the worst thing because he gives us another added element on offense to our bench. And I think makes the team a little bit deeper. So yes, I want him to play.
Yeah, I think going forward, the Knicks have to get game two tomorrow. If you go down
Yes.
0-2 going to Miami,
That is not good.
that's trouble. And I think for the Heat, I mean, they're pretty strong at home, I feel like, in the playoffs. So that would not be a good sign. I do think the Knicks are not in trouble, but I think they need to get tomorrow night's game to kind of get back on track. But before we get to our draft talk, I just wanted to mention the two games tonight. We have Sixers Celtics game one tipping off in Boston. We also have game two of Suns Nuggets. Jimmy, do you have any thoughts about either one of those games?
I'll say this, Suns Nuggets. If the Suns go down 0-2, that's definitely going to be tough hill to overclimb in Phoenix. But I would be not that surprised because the way Denver played the other night, the Suns did not look good, to say the least.
Especially on the defensive side.
Yeah,
of
they
things.
were actually, frankly, a nightmare. So I think it's a big game for the Suns, and they definitely need to bounce back because going down 0-2 to Phoenix, I mean, especially with the way things have been going, that would not be good. As for 76ers Celtics, I mean, hey, listen, Is Embiid playing? That's
I
the first
don't
question
think
I
so.
have.
He's doubtful. So
Yeah.
I would say no.
It doesn't seem like he's gonna play, like based off of what you just said. And Jeff, that's not looking good for you guys. You would need a massive game out of Tyrese Maxey and James Harden. Like honestly, I think you would probably need like 40 from both.
Yeah, I would say
Like realistically,
you probably maybe you need 30 from both. Maybe one of them gets 35, 40, and then you
Yeah.
get Harris or Melton or Niang, one of them to have like 20, and then
no,
the other
Harris would we already know we're getting out of Tobias Harris.
15 or 20.
Yeah, we're getting like
as you
somewhere
say.
between 15, 20, and I don't know. That's about it. You just write him off. He's not going to do anything in that situation. Tobias Harris, get out of here. If you're relying on Tobias Harris, I think you've already lost tonight's game. If you want me to be completely honest, because that's the way things go in the playoffs with Tobias Harris, right?
Well, I will say this. Listen, I know that he might not score 30 every night, but
Or any
if
night.
you know that you're getting 15 or 20, I mean, that can't be a bad thing, right?
Yeah, but
Especially when he's not the number one option. But tonight he's the number
not-
3 option because
Yeah.
Embiid's out.
well, I can remember the days when he was essentially like your number 2 option, right?
Right.
There was some bad days there where you kind of needed him to step up and he never did.
I just hope
I
he
think he's
plays.
just fallen down the kind of like the order just because he just
Yeah.
never has really ever delivered.
I think the thing is the fact that he's overpaid makes it look bad.
Yes,
I
it
think that
makes
is
it
a
really
huge
bad.
reason why. Now, I think he's a good player. I think if he plays the way he did in the first round, if I have more of that, I would take it because he was right around 20 points pretty much every game. I mean, I'd take that in a heartbeat, but I think tonight, though, when you know Embiid's out and you know you need him to score, I mean, it's a lot of pressure, and we have not really seen him put up more points than he usually has in these kind of situations. So
Yeah, he's just always been like that baseline. Like it's just always the same line.
right. I want to mention one thing about Phoenix and Denver real quick.
Yeah.
I completely agree. If the Suns go down 0-2, they're in a lot of trouble. I know that they would be going home, but down 2-0 to Denver, I just don't know if you can overcome it. The thing with Phoenix too, and I'll say it again, I've said this throughout the playoffs, they have no bench. Where's the
Yeah.
bench scoring?
The bench.
And I don't think Denver has much of a bench either, but I think their bench is a little bit better.
No, but Denver is just a deeper team.
Right. And,
They're
coming
just
off the
a
bench,
deeper
you have
team.
Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, Christian Brown, whoever. Those bench guys are better than
Way better than
Landry
whatever.
Shamet and
Yeah.
whoever is
I
coming off the
don't
bench.
know. Like the thing with the
Josh
Suns
Okogie.
is like it's just nobody gives them anything off the bench. And it's not necessarily like all the bench's fault because I'm gonna be honest, some of these guys just really aren't that good of NBA players. Like, yeah, they do have this awesome lineup. Like, hey, we're getting 30 almost from Kevin Durant. Like, that's gonna be great.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like when the rest of the team doesn't deliver, it makes it very brutal. I mean, I just felt like at this point in this game, regardless of what they did, and I know they tried to make the switch, like they put Torrey Craig on the bench, but he didn't do anything on the bench. He gave them 3 points.
Honestly, he
Like-
was pretty good as a starter.
And he was good as a
He
starter.
was around
That's the
15
thing.
to 20 points as a starter, and he's the worst starter on the team.
I know. And it's almost like crazy. Like, I literally don't even know if there's anything that they could do to like what are you going to do? Bring Chris Paul then off the bench? Like, no,
No,
you
you
can't
can't
do
do
that.
that.
You know what I mean? Like, there's just nothing they could do in terms of getting points. Like, not anybody off the bench. Gives
No
them
one had more
anything.
than 7 points off the bench, and the 7 points were from Jock Landale, who's DeAndre Ayton's backup center. The other thing too for Denver,
Well, Chris Paul, by the way, too, really did not help going 1 of 5 from
No.
3. Like, he was kind of like he had some good looks too.
and I'm not one to call people out, but he has had a couple of games like this where Durant and Booker have had pretty good games, and then Ayton's kind of like having an okay game, and then Chris Paul has like 10 points. Like, you can't have that,
Yeah.
especially when we're playing Denver, who has a high octane offense.
Yeah, and also too, I'm not gonna lie, like I think that DeAndre Ayton should probably be getting a little bit more of the ball, like from some of like. It's just my opinion. Like I think they got to do a better job of kind of like staggering their lineups. Like just because you have Kevin Durant out there doesn't always mean that you need to have Booker or Ayton out there. Just because if you don't have the bench, you got to mix it up during the game. You know what I mean?
Right. And
Like you can't just be like, nope, starters all back out there. Like you're gonna have to find something. Like you know what I thought, and this is from a couple of years ago, but when the Rockets had Harden and they had Chris Paul, one of the things they did was they kind of played them a lot separated,
yeah, and
just to kind of balance their team out, and it was what worked the best. And I don't just know why more teams don't really do that. I mean, I know you're trying to, and there's going to be points where you mix in starters with some of your bench guys, but you need like a little bit more of a like structure to it, which benefits your team.
You need a balance.
Of
Yeah,
course.
I think the Suns could do that. They could have Booker and KD start, and then one of them takes a rest and the other comes in for the other. I think they could always have one of the two out there at all times because, like you said, that'd be more of a structure of the team.
Mhm.
Another person I wanted to mention really quickly before we get to the draft, Jamal Murray has been awesome for Denver. I mean, he's very underrated, I think, as a player. I think not a lot of people talk about him when you talk about who are the best point guards in the NBA. I think he's got to be up there in the conversation. And we kind of forget in the bubble, he was going off in the playoffs and he was proving it again. He had an awesome first round series. I think if you're the Suns defensively, obviously Jokic is the focal point, but Jamal Murray's got to be the second guy. He's clearly the number 2 option. So I think going forward, they got to find a way to contain him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that definitely has to be a focus because it's not just him, it's also Nikola Jokic. And when Murray's also going off, it just makes your job a lot more difficult.
Definitely. So now let's get into some NFL draft talk, shall
Yeah,
we?
let's start off with you, Andrew. So let's talk about the Ravens draft as a whole. I know we discussed the first round pick on Friday. You guys got Zay Flowers, wide receiver from Boston College, who I liked as a prospect. I see no problems with that pick. I just want to know, what are your thoughts based on the other moves that they made? I thought it was interesting. They drafted Trenton Simpson from Clemson, a linebacker, in the 3rd round. I thought that was a really interesting pick. And they also recently declined Patrick Queen, who's one of their linebackers. His 5th-year option. He was a former first-round pick. So kind of talk about where the Ravens are at after the draft here.
Yeah, so I think that'll be a big thing going into this next season, depending or seeing how Trenton Simpson fits. He'll probably have to be fit into that starting role if he wants to compete and knock out Patrick Queen. I always thought we would have gone corner earlier than what we did. We ended up going corner in round 5. But yeah, definitely an interesting pick with the Trenton Simpson from Clemson. But I did see a tweet the other day saying that Ray Lewis said at one point last year during a Clemson game that Trenton Simpson was the best college backer he's ever seen. So I'm not going to take that lightly.
No, yeah,
Because
that's
Ray
interesting.
Lewis.
That's interesting. It's Ray Lewis saying that, and he is the
Yeah.
best linebacker in Ravens history, no doubt. One of the best ones to ever play in football as well.
Yeah. So excited to see how that all plays out. I think what Patrick Queen will be playing this year, I think he'll be playing for a contract out elsewhere outside of the Ravens, because I just don't see, after us declining his 5th-year option, I don't see him returning after this year.
Yeah, it's very possible that he might not be there next year, especially with them not picking. Well, I guess the case is if he does have a really good year, you could always bring him back on a contract that's really not that big, right? Like, because he's going to be desperate for options.
He's going to be desperate for options, but I think if he has a big year, I think he'll be the money hungry guy. But that's not to say that. What if Simpson doesn't step up and
Well, they
bring
could
that-
always, if he's really, really good, they could always franchise tag him. But I don't know if they'd have the cap space for that because they're already going to be in a really tight situation.
Yeah, definitely. But and again, that all depends on how well Simpson fits into that starting role outside of Roquan Smith, who we just signed for another 5 years, which was again a huge addition. And just going back on it, I think I was honestly just surprised that we did end up picking Simpson, just because last year after we added Roquan Smith, him and Patrick Queen combined for 150 tackles in 2 months.
No, yeah, the entire defense took such a level up when Roquan Smith was brought to the team. Like, there's no doubt about that. And he certainly improved Patrick Queen. I think the question is, you've seen Patrick Queen with and without. Now imagine what a Drew Simpson could do, like a without, and maybe his level of play would be higher than Patrick Queen's. And then when you factor in maybe this Roquan Smith addition bumping everyone else up, you just get ultimately a better combination of linebackers, because you always got to look to improve. Like, that's one thing with the Eagles, I will say. I got to admire, like, I liked them trading for DeAndre Swift, Jeffrey. Like, we got to talk about that. Like, that was a pretty interesting move. Like, never being willing to ever stop improving your team. Yeah, they have Gainwell. Oh, they got Rashad Penny. They had Boston Scott. Oh, no, let's go trade. I mean, essentially nothing for DeAndre Swift. Like,
Yeah.
that was a good move.
Yeah,
I
you have
think.
to respect it.
Yeah, I was shocked when I heard the news, but I was obviously happy because I think going into the year, everyone talks about, oh, how good the O-line is, which it is. But I think losing Sanders is going to be kind of interesting. Who would take away that, or not take away, who would take on that number one running back role? But I think now it's probably going to be clear cut DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting to see if like they'll still give like carries to like Boston Scott. Like, I don't really think that there's really like this huge necessity to. Like, I understand you want to keep guys fresh, but I think Gainwell and Swift like can be productive.
Yeah, and we'll see about Penny. I don't really know much about
and
Penny.
Rashad Penny. I
I
forgot about
haven't
Rashad.
seen him play too much. I mean, I've seen a couple games with him in Seattle, but I really don't know much
Well,
about
probably.
him.
I mean, I guess there's a chance maybe Boston Scott, or it's probably going to be a competition for the spots.
I was gonna say I
would
wouldn't be
think
surprised
Swift-
if they move on from like Boston Scott.
I
I
would-
wouldn't be surprised.
yeah.
I know they brought him back on a 1-year deal.
Yeah, that's true. It's definitely very possible. I mean, you can definitely improve in some areas. I mean, Boston Scott's not the best running back ever.
I don't know if we'll beat the Giants anymore.
That's true. That's very interesting. So, all right, Andrew, getting back to the Ravens here, I just wanted to bring up that really good move. But really, this is kind of a question for both of you. We'll actually get to some of the Eagles later picks in a second. So maybe just a question for you, Andrew. What do you really like give this like draft as a grade so far?
So far just off the initial impressions, I think I'll give it a B. It wasn't bad. It wasn't too flashy. Again, that linebacker pick really surprised me, and the fact that we didn't go cornerback earlier. But yeah, I'll give it a B. It wasn't bad. I think it was pretty solid. I think a lot of the moves will be not exploited, but we picked a lot of athletic guys, especially
And that's what you
on the
want, I think, in
defensive
today's
side.
NFL.
Yeah. And especially on the defensive side, I have no doubt that we'll have no problems elevating their game and polishing all of them.
Yeah, and I think it was also good to get a wide receiver for Lamar. I think that
was
kind of the
huge,
big
yeah.
thing. Like that's what you needed. You need more playmakers on the offense. You had Andrews, but really the wide receiver room has been lacking. You go overnight from Duvernay and Bateman being your guys out there to essentially Bateman becoming. I think he's going to be kind of like a 2, or I could see him being the 3 actually with Zay Flowers. Like I think they're reaching for the stars for Zay Flowers. I think they're hoping him and Odell can be like kind of like a good old young tandem together. And then I think they're hoping that Zay Flowers takes like a, kind of like a next step, kind of like reminiscent to what I think like Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb have kind of done, right? Like they kind of went from being these guys who were like, oh, they're next up to quickly they produced and they were given that role because Odell's not going to be playing on the Ravens for that long.
Yeah, probably.
So Zay Flowers is really like the future.
Right. And I know that they took 2 offensive linemen in the 6th and 7th round. So you can say what you want about them taking them in that late of the draft. I think that's a good thing too.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something there.
The Ravens have always done a really good job with their O-line and their D-line. And if you look at the best teams in the NFL, what do they all have? Good O-line, good D-line. Like the Ravens,
trenches.
yeah, the game starts
Gotta win in the trenches.
And they do. And then you know who's another team who does that? And let's just move on to it now.
There
The
you go.
Eagles. Yeah. Jalen Carter falling to 9 is such a steal.
Astonishing.
And then you also get Nolan Smith in the first round. But no, it doesn't stop there. The fact that they got Kelly Ringo in the 4th round. I mean, this was a guy who before Marvin Harrison essentially cooked him on New Year's Eve, right? No, that's what happens. And there was
It's true.
a lot of guys who didn't do good against Marvin Harrison Jr. You're not going to be able to, right? Like your team is basically kind of, and most times college, right? The guys getting drafted are some of the best players on their team. And they're being given a lot of responsibility within those schemes that the coaches come up with. And sometimes they're going to be asked to do more against players who are just simply better than them. And that's kind of what happened against Marvin Harrison for a lot of guys. And Kelly Ringo before that was a projected 1st round pick, and he goes to the Eagles in the 4th round.
Yeah.
And gives them more depth at a position that they already had pretty good depth at.
Yeah. I mean, we're just, I guess, adding more riches to that group. I think the fact that he fell that far and the Eagles found a way to get him is unbelievable. And I still don't know what this obsession is with the Georgia defense.
Yeah, I don't either.
There's
but
clearly something there.
There's a lot of really good players on the Georgia defense. That's
Can't
why.
blame them.
Yeah, I was just happy at who we picked, and not just that, just the positions that we picked at. I mean, getting a defensive tackle, I think, was nice. You can't have too many defensive tackles. I think linebacker was huge, getting Smith at 30. I think that's a nice pick there.
I also like your pick in the 3rd round.
I did too, Sidney Brown.
From Illinois. He was first team all Big Ten this year,
Right.
as a safety.
And that's one of our
And
more weaker positions.
And you
I
guys
would say.
needed safety help So it's
Considering that Gardner
That's
Johnson
yeah.
was lost in free agency.
Yeah. And that was a pretty good pickup, I think, to help with that. There is one move that I guess stands out more than the rest. And it's the not necessarily quarterback for the starting position, but you got Tanner McKee from Stanford in the 6th round. Any thought about that?
I don't know.
You guys don't have a backup quarterback, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. We
Yeah.
had lost Minshew to the Colts, I believe. So I guess he might be challenging for that spot. I honestly have never really heard of Tanner McKee. I'm sure I've watched him in college and not really know who he
Stanford.
is.
It's all the Stanford quarterbacks.
I've watched 1 or 2 Stanford games
It's
last
all the
season.
Stanford quarterbacks. Like, I really don't know why, but Stanford actually does a sneaky good job of producing quarterbacks. Davis Mills is from there.
Andrew Luck.
Fitzpatrick.
Fitzpatrick went to Harvard.
Oh, wrong. Smart.
Yeah.
Wrong smart
There
school.
is a lot of other guys from Stanford though, like Kevin Hogan.
Kevin Hogan, that's
yeah,
another name.
there's other names on there too, but we don't have to run through Stanford quarterback.
That was definitely
John Elway was from
an
Stanford.
eyebrow raiser for sure, though.
Yeah, it certainly was. All right, I guess I'll move on to anything else that you want to add though on the Eagles.
No, I got nothing. The only thing I was going to add is I like taking Tyler Steen in the 2nd round. It doesn't hurt to add to the O-line depth.
Oh yeah, of course.
And we've done it in the past, so I'm glad that Howie Roseman's continuing to do that.
Yeah, so I don't know if you saw this, but apparently there's like a report out there that a lot of the other GMs, this was from somebody at NFL Network, I think it was Peter Schrager, was like, oh, other GMs are annoyed that Howie Roseman is getting such like such a respect from like the media for every move that he makes. And I think it's good though, for honestly, and maybe it will make some of these other GMs make smarter decisions because some of the moves they make are so horrible.
I did see that report. I think it was kind of funny. I just laughed at it because it's my team. So
Yeah.
I'm obviously
I
happy that people are somewhat jealous of
I
us,
bet
guess.
that made Howie smile. That's for sure.
Yeah. But I agree with 100% what you said earlier about how he doesn't seem satisfied every year. He finds a way to improve the team.
Mhm.
I mean, we've seen it the last 2 years. I thought we crushed the draft last year. I thought we pretty much nailed most of our picks, and then I didn't think it would get better. And then this year, it's arguably just as good.
Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna move on to the Broncos now. I'll mention them.
Please do.
Yeah, so round 2, we trade up. To my surprise, we had 2/3, but we end up trading up into the 2nd, and we draft a receiver, which was interesting because we already had, I thought, we had a lot of receiving cores, or a lot in our receiving core, and we're paying a lot of money towards our receiving core too. That's the thing. Here's the thing. Judy got his option picked up for 5th year today. He's the one. So I think that there's no doubt about that. But I think there's a chance that either Sutton, Tim Patrick, or KJ Hamler is not playing for the Broncos in the fall. Just because with this move, you don't draft somebody number 63 overall for nothing.
Yeah.
Especially too now that Sean Payton's calling the plays, essentially calling the shots. He saw a role for this player, and Marvin Mims, I hope, can have the big play effect for the Broncos like he did at Oklahoma. I mean, he averaged over 20 yards a catch. That's pretty good, especially when you consider that he went from having Caleb Williams in year 1 to not having Caleb Williams in year 2, and Spencer Rattler too for parts of year 1. So it's just a big drop off in terms of quarterback play, and he still produced, which I think is impressive. And I loved. What'd you say?
It's a sign of a good receiver when you can produce when you have nothing thrown to you.
Exactly. Like that's what one of the things that I'm excited about for a guy like DJ Moore. Like going to the Bears, like God, if they can just get him the ball. Like I wanted to see him with Bryce Young so bad, just because I wanted to see the Panthers kind of, I don't know. I thought it was interesting what their offense could do. But yeah, I agree with that point. I always thought about DJ Moore and Terry McLaurin. I was like, these guys are really impressive. If they ever actually get a good quarterback, they would be really, really good receivers. So that is a true point. Great to bring that up, Andrew. And then the other guy that I loved that the Broncos draft was Drew Sanders from Arkansas. Number 67 overall. They drafted him in the 3rd round. And this was a guy that I knew had round 2, round 3 potential, but he was a really good player in Arkansas.
Good pass rusher.
Yeah, good,
that's what I read.
Really good pass rusher. And that's what I don't know how we're going to use him, but just the athletic ability that he has as a linebacker is what excites me. Like he has a great ability in open field. I know we have to take a break, but anyway, the point is I'm very excited about this pick.
We can continue this on the other side as well.
Yeah, we can. We can take a quick break right now, though.
Yes, we'll be right back on After the Whistle. Hello, welcome back to WLOI, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOI.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle with Jeffrey Bazzi, Jimmy Cody, and Andrew Sciafalo. Sorry, we had to go to break a little abruptly there, but we're going to resume our NFL draft talk. Jimmy, is there anything else from the Broncos that you would like to mention?
Yeah, so like I was saying, I really like the Drew Sanders pick. I think there's a lot of potential there, and we kind of need a linebacker. We also addressed corner Riley Moss from Iowa, so that'll be interesting to see how that works out. We needed a safety, we drafted that, and then we also went with our round 7 pick was actually, I would say, to me, like the third most interesting pick, just because it's an O lineman from Oregon. They've had a pretty decent track record recently with O linemen, so that excited me. And also the player was second team all Pac-12. So his name was Alex Forsyth, and he plays center. So it's good to get depth at the O line because we did not have any depth. And I feel like this is the most that we've kind of put. Like this was the first time I ever felt like that we addressed literally like every position possible. I thought the only one that we didn't that I was kind of surprised with was running back, but I understood that we did spend money on Samaje Perine, and they were expecting Javonte to come back. So I'm not that mad about it. And also I know that running backs can be found anywhere. So I'm also not that mad about that too. I will say I was shocked by receiver though. And I think that makes me think that we're going to be making a trade.
Yeah. I think it's good though. I think the fact that they know that they signed Perine, and if they expect Javonte Williams to come back, I think on the horizon it sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds like the Broncos had a solid draft though.
Yeah, no, I didn't think it wasn't flashy, that's for sure. But I think they addressed with it definitely wasn't flashy, but they addressed
They definitely did what they had to
Yeah.
do.
and they didn't have much to work with.
Yeah, I was trying to say that they used what they had.
Yeah, they did not. That's the thing too. That's when you don't have your first round pick, and especially when it's at 5, that makes it really tough. But realistically, I don't know who they would have drafted at 5. Had they had the pick, I think it should have been Paris Johnson.
Yeah,
I
that would
think
be a
that-
great pick.
I think Paris Johnson would have been or corner.
Right,
You have 2 great corners, but also too, it's like you got to improve the offense.
right.
Who knows? I mean, they went receiver in the second round. Who's not to say they would have maybe traded back for a receiver? Like I think their options would have been a lot more open at that point had they had the pick. But obviously, with what they had, I think they did an okay job. So, any other players that stood out to you guys? I'll say this: the quarterbacks. There was a lot of interesting quarterbacks who got picked. Andrew.
There's definitely going to be a lot of different crazy situations with quarterbacks. First of all, I think Will Levis was 33 overall. No, 34.
34. Yeah, 34.
34
To
overall
Tennessee.
to Tennessee. And now their quarterback room is Ryan Tannehill, Willis.
Yep.
Willis, that's his name, who they picked decently high last year.
3rd round last year, but had the potential to be a first rounder, right? Like that was the conversation going into the draft before almost every quarterback besides Kenny Pickett slipped out of the first round.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting situation in that quarterback room in Tennessee for sure.
Yeah, I think I feel like Will Levis like is an interesting like kind of comparison to like Josh Allen, only because like that was what people always made, just because he has the physical attributes. His college stats weren't that great, but there was like flashes that you saw. But I think you could still say that Will Levis might have had a better team around him than Josh Allen did. So I think that was the reasoning for like why he should fall. But then I always find it so interesting that there's like these impact guys like Lamar who almost slips out of the first round, right? But then there's an Anthony Richardson who like only played 1 year, and then he's the 4th overall pick. Like Trey Lance, who played a handful of games, he's only the 3rd overall pick. Like I was so confused just because I think it's all about it's about the eye that you have that other people don't. Like I think that for a lot of positions, like Jalen Hurts, like seeing him, like I don't think a lot of people expected Jalen Hurts to go in the 2nd round. I don't think that was the expectation at all.
Kind of just slid down there.
And you know what's interesting? That we bring up the Jalen Hurts move, but there was kind of a move that reminded me of that in this draft, where a team has like a decent starter and they draft somebody kind of high. And that was the Lions. They have Jared Goff. He had a really good season last year for Jared Goff, probably one of his best seasons ever. Definitely his best one on the Lions, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Definitely his best one in a few years. And the offense looks on the up and up. And now they draft Hendon Hooker from Tennessee in the third round. I get it, it's a third round, but that feels like a really similar move to the Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts situation. Do you agree, Jeffrey?
100%. Yeah. And the thing is, Hooker's coming off that ACL injury. So I'm not sure.
I don't think he's any chance to start this year.
Right. And I don't know if they would I don't think they would rush him. And considering that they have Goff, who's a pretty solid quarterback to begin with. I mean,
he was probably one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFC last year.
He probably was.
Yeah.
And I think for the Lions, you obviously are going to run it back with Goff to see if he gets better and the team obviously improves, because they kind of surprised a little bit last year. So hopefully they can build off the second half of the season, because you'd expect them to definitely compete for the NFC North and for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I would expect
But I
them to be
think
the favorites for the NFC North, honestly.
The alternative is, let's say Goff's kind of a little worse maybe, and maybe the team
If he doesn't take another step
was
forward,
kind of a fluke last year. Now do you go to Hooker? I don't know. I think it's something that is going to be interesting to see how it plays out down the road.
yeah, I think it will be interesting too. I think a lot of it has to do with what is Hendon Hooker when he's on the field? Like, how is he going to be in preseason? Like, I don't know if he's going to play, but it's an ACL. So, like, there's a chance that he could come back by August. I don't know. Like, because there's some guys who come back from 8 months. There's some, because it did happen last November. So, if it's 8 months, could technically play. But I don't think he should be in a position to be rushed. If I was the Lions, I would not even be looking at him this year. I would be like, just take a year to learn the offense and get healthy.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think
And I
that's
think
a good way to
they
go.
should have a long-term approach, kind of like the way the Eagles did with Jalen Hurts. The only one who didn't have a long-term approach with the Jalen Hurts Carson Wentz situation, and there's 2 guys. Number 1 was Carson Wentz, because obviously I don't think he was a big fan of the move. And the second guy was Jalen Hurts, because he was the guy, when given the opportunity, who was ready to play, and he put in the hard work. Like, his first game, they beat a decent Saints team
They did.
at home. And I remember being shocked because I had watched them recently and I thought, this is the worst team I have ever seen in my life. The 2020 Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, we were really,
They
really,
were
really
a
bad.
nightmare. Somehow looks competent with this new Hurts guy. out
Yeah,
there.
also somehow having 4 wins in week 14 and still being 1 game back in first place. That's another conversation, though.
Oh, yeah, that the 2020 NFC East is something I'll never forget.
Yeah,
That's
Washington winning at 7-9. I think that was the record.
typical Washington Commanders division title.
But I agree. Drafting Hooker definitely raises your eyes when it comes to the future of Goff, because I think when the Lions traded for him, obviously they traded Stafford away. They were kind of going into this new era, and I think he's been pretty good in Detroit. But I think
he's exceeded expectations. I don't think
There
I
is-
don't think the Lions knew what they were going to get out of Jared.
I think
Goff.
the thing is, I don't know if it's like Goff has pressure. I think the thing is, maybe Hooker can kind of get them over the top, because maybe if Hooker hits on his potential, maybe that's higher than what Goff can ever be. I don't know.
Because I think Jared Goff's potential is very high too. Like, I was a
And
little
he was
shocked.
number 1 pick for a reason too.
He was the
Yeah.
number 1 pick for a reason.
He's
too.
been in a Super Bowl.
Yes.
I
Like, I
forget that.
the way Jared Goff played last year, I thought he was pretty good. I was relatively shocked by a lot of times. Like, I was waiting for him a lot of times to kind of mess up, and he didn't. Like, I know that that's a weird way of thinking about it, but just based on the Jared Goff I've seen in the past, and is this a new Jared Goff? I don't know. I want to see this year, because I think this year is like the Lions as a whole take another big step forward. Then you can realistically, they remind me of like the 2021 Eagles to like a lesser extent, where they're not like, they didn't make the playoffs, but they kind of had this out of nowhere kind of like run where you're like, whoa. And they've kind of improved. Obviously, they drafted a running back pretty high, who you're going to expect to be a massive impact player right away. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't know if they have as much talent to make the turnaround that the Eagles did and like go all the way to the Super Bowl, but I just see the potential there. And
I do too.
it can't help but intrigue me too. And they've made some decent free agency moves.
Yeah, and the thing with Hooker too coming in, it's not like we haven't seen him play. It's not like he's an unknown, and I know that he's not going to play for a little bit because of the injury, but he can make a lot of good throws. I mean, watching him at Tennessee, he can make pretty much any throw that you can give him, especially the deep ball. He has a really good deep ball, and he can extend plays, but we'll see if the knee affects that. Hopefully for his sake and for Lions fans' sake, he'll be back to 100%, and he can kind of get back to his previous mobility.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk too about one of the other quarterbacks that was drafted. Stetson Bennett goes to the Rams in the 4th round.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of interesting. I was not really shocked that Stetson Bennett was drafted. I felt like a lot of people were like shocked for some reason. And I never understood that because this is a guy who was back to back national championship winner at Georgia as the starting quarterback. And say what you want about last year's team. I get like the 2021 team, like, oh, we didn't really, people felt like he kind of got carried. I thought this year, I thought he was a big reason for their success.
Yeah, I thought he carried a little bit himself.
Yeah.
I don't think he carried. I think they were just better than everybody, but he
Right.
balled.
I think he shouldered more of a responsibility than people want to give him credit for.
Mhm.
Because we know that Georgia's had these all-time great defenses, especially the last 2 years because they've gone back to back. But I definitely think over the years he's improved. I mean, he was a walk-on, I believe. I don't even know where before Georgia, and then he transferred there and kind of see his story and kind of see how he's risen through the ranks. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and
Not a bad passer either. He's a pretty good pocket passer.
yeah, so he's all right with the passing. I think the question is going to be kind of his arm. I think that's the biggest
Yeah.
thing. But I'll tell you what, the element of speed that he adds, if you want me to compare him to a guy, and I mean this in the nicest way possible. I understand that some teams are paying 40 million for this guy, and like this guy, I understand some people might see it as rude, this comparison, but Daniel Jones,
Okay.
that's kind of the potential that I see. And I'll tell you what, I think him going to Los Angeles with the Rams is a good thing because Sean McVay is a good offensive coach. Like, if you're a quarterback, you want to go to a guy who I feel like you can have a good relationship with. There's a veteran quarterback in front of you if you're Stetson Bennett. The Rams don't have any other quarterback on the roster, by the way. So it's kind of like the same thing as the Eagles with Tanner McKee, as this guy is going to be kind of looking at as the potential backup right away. So for Stetson Bennett's case, like, he's going to have to be like in a position where he's ready to pick up on it fast, because I think that's going to be indicative of whether or not they think that he can be a guy in the future for them, right? Because I don't know how much longer Stafford's going to play realistically.
Yeah, he's I think in his mid-30s, so it's not like he has X amount of years left. He's probably a little limited with his career, but
And he just came off an injury too.
yeah,
But going to McVay, I think, is realistically the best part of that.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I
I
agree.
think that's the best spot he could have been in. He gets to sit behind Matthew Stafford, who's a quarterback or a Super Bowl winning quarterback now.
And he also helped Baker a lot last year. That was one of the things that Baker said.
and
was
then
how
you
much
saw
help
him
Matt
land a
Stafford
deal
was.
with Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he gets to sit behind him for at least a year, and he's got the great offensive mind of Sean McVay, which Sean McVay, I think he can plug and play almost anybody. Like, that's the thing with him and his offense. He just makes it so easy for these quarterbacks, which is why he's so great. But yeah, I think for Bennett, this was the best possible situation.
Yeah, if I was Stetson Bennett, I would be very happy to go in the fourth round to the Rams. I think that would be very good landing spot for him. Is there anybody else who stood out to you guys in this draft? I have to say there was one team that kind of stood out to me under the radar that I did not get to mention, and it's the Jaguars. I like that they went and got a tackle in the first round, Harrison from Oklahoma. I didn't mention this the other night, but they also added some players later in the draft that I think are all at positions of need. And I would not be surprised if the Jaguars take a very big step forward next year, just in terms of like, I don't know if they're going to be able to surpass the Chiefs, Bengals, Bills, but in the regular season, I could see them like running through the NFC South, or I'm sorry, the AFC South. But also too, what team do you guys think has the most potential to grow from this draft? Because I just named one. I'm sure you guys have one in mind.
I don't know. I'm trying to think about the overall draft as a whole. I know that some teams made some notable picks in the first couple of rounds. And I'm trying to think. I think the Giants did pretty well. Just
Okay.
what I've seen. I kind of forget who they picked later in the rounds, but I kind of liked what they did early on. I thought they did pretty good.
Yeah,
Um,
their first three.
I saw a
picks-
lot of A minuses for them as a draft grade.
Their first three picks were all guys that were targets for them, possibly at 25. So
Yeah, I think getting Jalen Hyatt was a sneaky good pick. I
Mm-hmm.
think he can help right away. Trying to think about their other picks. Deontay Banks was their first pick, I believe.
Yeah, he was
They
the corner.
I think that was a great pick. I think that's something that they needed. Eric Gray was the other one too. That was the other one I'm going to mention. I think he's a pretty good player too. So I think he's going to help. I thought they did pretty good overall.
yeah. I was also I like the Cardinals too. I like
Yeah,
the moves that
Cardinals
they
took a
made.
lot. Had a good draft.
Yeah, the Cardinals had some good moves. I like that they got a lot of future picks too. And also too, I like the Texans move in the first round. I mean, getting two dynamite players off the bat. I know I said this on Friday, but that just immediately impacts your team. And I think you can automatically say the Texans are better today than they were yesterday. Just
Definitely.
solely on the fact that they got CJ Stroud and Will Anderson. That's two high impact players that you're
No
expecting to
doubt.
step right in.
100%. You can't argue that. That's
Yeah.
definitely true. Is there anything else you guys want to add about the NFL draft?
No, I think I'm good with the NFL draft for now.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention before we log off here, I know our time is a little bit limited, but we had a couple game sevens last night in the NHL playoffs, and an absolute shocking result from Boston last night. The Boston Bruins, for those who don't know, they won 65 games in the regular season. They had the most wins and the most points of any NHL team in regular season ever. And they got bounced in the first round last night by the Florida Panthers 4-3 in overtime. And they were also leading the series 3-1. They lost the final 3 games to lose the series. I'm not sure if either one of you caught the game, but absolute shocker.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, right? Like you have this best regular season ever, and then you do nothing. Disappointing for the fans for sure, but if you want me to be throwing a tear parade for the Boston fans, then you came to the wrong place because I certainly will not be doing that. I could not care less. I honestly just thought it was funny. I actually thought this was the second most funny thing compared to the Patriots being 18-0 and then losing to Eli Manning in the Super Bowl. Like that was how funny this was to me.
The other thing too that was shocking, and this is unbelievable, but the Panthers were the last team to clinch a playoff spot, and I think in either conference.
The Panthers were so, like, to be honest with you, not great down the stretch. Like they were average at best. Like just an average team coming into the playoffs. And it was not hot or anything.
It's very ironic too, because the Panthers actually won the President's Trophy last year, and they were playing the President's Trophy winners this year in the Bruins.
And then they won.
And they beat them. So
but they didn't win last year when they had the President's Trophy.
No, they did not. They got by their first round series, but they lost in the second round. But an absolute just shocking result. I don't think anyone really expected the Bruins to go out in the first round. I think a lot of people expected them to go out maybe in the second round or the conference final, but the first round, I don't think anyone saw that coming. And then the other game 7, I'm not sure if you guys caught this one. The Kraken went on the road. They beat the defending champion Avalanche 2-1. So now they win their first ever playoff series, and now they will go on to face the Dallas Stars in the next round. Absolute shocker there too.
Yeah, that was insane. Game 7 was in Colorado, and they still can't get it done. The Avalanche, which is crazy when you consider that they won the title last year, but anything happens in hockey. It's playoff hockey. Anything can happen. And credit to the Kraken, like last year, they were really not a good team. They've improved a lot over a year.
Yeah, they kind of came out of nowhere this year. They didn't really have much scoring going into last year, but this year they added some veterans. They definitely were scoring at a better clip this year. And how about them going on the road? In this series, I think they were 3-1 on the road. They were 1-2 at home. So Colorado, they did their job away from home. They won 2 of the 3 in Seattle, but Seattle just paid them right back. They won 3 out of the 4 in Colorado.
I know, which is actually crazy when you think about it, because that is just so not a way that most series go. Like typically, the better team is either kind of winning at home, or both teams are kind of winning at home, or the better team just typically kind of dominates on all fronts too. That's like another thing, but just crazy to have just such an up and down kind of series. But I think that speaks to like how much the Kraken have improved. Like, I don't think that the Avalanche are as good as last year, but I still thought they were a decent team.
Right. Coming into the year, the Avalanche were obviously the defending champs. They pretty much ran it back, and they had some injuries throughout the year, but they still had a great record. And I think what hurt them in this series was they lost their captain, Gabriel Landeskog. He was out for the whole series. And then they had a couple suspensions from some hits that they had to deal with, and they had some injuries along the way. The other thing, too, I would bring up, just I think it's pretty notable, the Kraken scored first in every single game of the series. So the fact that the Kraken would always get out to a lead, I don't think that would really help the Avalanche either. They kind of fell back behind early.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's crazy, though. They scored first in every single game.
Yeah, that's definitely a cool fact for sure.
Good
way to set the tempo, that's for sure.
Yeah, props to the Kraken. And then there's another game 7 tonight with the Rangers and the Devils. They will be facing off at Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. And I'll bring this up just now because my brother, he wanted to chime in. He asked me about Jack Hughes, what I thought about him. And apparently he was being talked about by Wayne Gretzky. And he said that he thinks Jack Hughes plays very similar to Gretzky himself. And I agree. I mean, coming out of
Gretzky said that.
Gretzky said that Jack Hughes is a similar player to him, and now that I'm reacting to it, obviously it's a bold statement, no doubt. Now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, they're both fast skaters. That is, I think they have similarities there. I think as far as the goal scoring goes, I mean, Jack Hughes is early in his career, but the fact that he had 43 goals in the early part of his career just for this year, and he had 56 assists. I mean, he's obviously one of the future stars of the NHL. So I don't know. That statement could be premature, but I don't know. Maybe a couple of years down the road, I think that could be true.
That's a really tough statement.
I would say
That's-
Connor McDavid's probably closer,
Yeah, it just
way closer.
You know what that reminds me of? Like when Michael Jordan said that like Blake Griffin should do the next Space Jam. Like he doesn't want to give credit to the guy who's actually the closest because he doesn't want that give that guy any dignity. Like Michael Jordan never would be like, "Oh, LeBron's better than me." Like he's never gonna put himself in the same conversation of that. And I feel like Wayne Gretzky's kind of doing the same thing here. I'm onto your tricks, Wayne Gretzky. I know
Yeah,
what you're trying to do. Say Jack Hughes reminds you of you. Yeah, Jack Hughes is never gonna. I don't think anybody's ever gonna be like, "Oh yeah, Jack Hughes is better than Wayne Gretzky." But you know, Connor McDavid at this point, like, there's a chance.
yeah,
At this point, though, I think the Hughes statement, that's a hot take.
yeah.
Hot take. Boiling hot take.
Now, listen, people can be similar in the way they play, but as far as stats go and numbers go, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Playing
I know,
style,
and
yeah,
I know Hughes
sure.
is very young too. But
Yes.
McDavid's not
He's in his
that
20s.
old. He's not that old.
Right. I think he's still in his 20s.
Yeah,
he
he
might
is.
be in the upper 20s, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think when you go back to the Gretzky statement, sure, he and Hughes, they play similarly. They're both fast skaters, get up and down the ice, and they kind of,
McDavid's 26, so he's not that old.
No, he's not that
He still
old.
has at least 7 more years of his prime.
he's like a young veteran. He's been around for a little bit, but he's also still super young.
And I would say he's probably not even going to hit his peak until he's probably 28. 28, 29, 30, 31.
Yeah.
That's your peak.
Yeah. He's peaking right now, but I still think he's got a lot more
Yeah, I
years
was
of
gonna
this.
say, I think he still has a lot more potential to reach too.
I think Oilers fans need to just enjoy every single second they have with McDavid.
Yeah, and the Oilers advanced.
Yeah, so they're moving on. They're playing the Golden Knights in the second round. I think that series starts tomorrow, Wednesday.
That's gonna be an interesting series because I just don't know if Edmonton can hang with Las Vegas, particularly with their defense. Like their defense is just not it.
Yeah, and I think the question every year for the Oilers is, can they get secondary scoring?
Yeah, well, honestly,
They've gotten it.
they've gotten it. They've gotten it because they have Draisaitl, they have Evander Kane.
Right.
Like they have some nice young pieces around, or not necessarily young, but nice good pieces around McDavid, like particularly on offense. Like there's a reason why their offense is successful, and it needs to be because that's really the only chance they have.
I think this is the best Oilers team that they've had, I think, in this McDavid era, at least since they've been a perennial playoff team. But I think the question is, they sometimes go through these peaks and valleys where they just look awful and they'll give up 3 goals in a row. I think the question is, can they limit those bad stretches? And you can't do that against Vegas. So I think if the Oilers can eliminate that, I think they could honestly go pretty far.
You know, the Oilers had a great combination back in the day of McDavid and Messier, and now they have McDavid and Draisaitl.
Yes.
I don't know. I think it would just be cool if it's like kind of like a full circle ending where it's like McDavid is also as great a player as, or just within his generation, he can win a couple cups and could be like the Wayne Gretzky of this generation, right?
Yeah,
Like,
speaking of Wayne Gretzky.
yeah, right. Just because, like, I think it would just be something that's cool just for the sake of hockey, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
I'm rooting for the Oilers just because I do want to see McDavid win a title.
He's also just so fun to watch.
Yeah, he's just so talented.
Whenever he gets the puck, it's must.
But what do you
TV.
think for tonight? Game 7, we got Rangers, Devils. Do you have a pick?
You know what I do? I'm gonna go with the Rangers.
Me
Um,
too.
I just think I trust Shesterkin more. He's just such a good goalie, and I think in a game 7 you need to have good goaltending, and I think he's just a really solid guy back there. I mean, he has been really good, especially early on in this series. Now I know in the middle, the Rangers had trouble winning games at home, but it really wasn't his fault, I think, for the most part. I know he gave up 3 in game 4, but he gave up 2 in game 3. I know he didn't really look good in game 5, but other than that, he's looked pretty solid. I just trust the Rangers more because they've been there. Now, I'm not going to discount the Devils. The Devils have been great all year, and they've been pretty good in this series. I'm just taking the experience, and I think the Rangers have the better goaltender.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting how this series has gone on, right? Like you look at it, the Rangers look like they were going to wipe the floor with the Devils in the beginning of it, right? Like that's how it looked. And the Devils recently like had this like kind of like comeback of their own, but not just like a comeback. It was like a tsunami. They get up to 3 games and they're essentially just need to clinch. And then it felt like with the way that the Rangers played the other day, it kind of took the heart and soul out of the Devils a little bit. Like that was a good game by the Rangers.
They
The
just
Rangers
kept pouring it on.
They
Yeah.
responded. They responded. And I feel like for the Devils case, like that game does not matter. Don't worry about it. But the Rangers are just playing with such, I feel like, an edge right now after that last game. Like that was kind of just mentally deflating for the Devils. And I feel like that is ultimately the thing that's going to kind of affect them. I'm also kind of surprised at the same time that like the Devils are the favored team here. Like I'm not gonna lie, I know it's
I
New
am a
Jersey,
little bit too.
but I don't think that really matters all that much just because it's so close.
Yeah, just look at games 1 and 2.
Like yeah, like Manhattan to Newark is on a good day. If they leave at the right time. It could be like an
Yeah.
hour 15.
Yeah. Which is crazy because
Yeah,
they're so close
they're
together
so
on the map.
close,
They're
but
so
yeah.
close.
I promise the distance doesn't seem that far.
No. I agree though. I know that the Devils are at home, but I feel like this is a game where most people I think would expect the Rangers to get it done just because of the type of players they have and they've been there in the past. But I will say going forward, one of these teams will be going on to Carolina. I would give each team probably a decent shot to win that series. I would take probably Carolina over the Devils. I do think I would pick the Rangers over Carolina.
Yeah.
Because I think Carolina looked okay in the first round, but I wasn't like mesmerized. I wasn't fascinated by how they played against the Islanders. And then the other series in the East would be Panthers Maple Leafs. That starts tomorrow. That's interesting too, because Toronto finally got over that first round curse that they had. They took down Tampa Bay, which I think is huge for their confidence. So I think they're a team to watch going forward because I think they can be pretty dangerous.
Yeah, this is gonna be some game tonight, that's for sure.
Yeah, tonight's gonna be a dogfight. But is
Andrew, you got a pick you want to get?
Yeah.
I'll be rooting for the Rangers. It'd be crazy if the Panthers go on a crazy run, go beat the statistically greatest hockey team, and just win the cup.
Yeah, no,
That'd be great.
That'd be
it would
quite
be
the story.
crazy. It would be crazy. All 5 of their fans would probably show up to the parade, I'm sure.
You know what's funny now that you mentioned that joke? The Panthers are limiting their ticket sales so that only US residents can buy the tickets. Did you see that?
Um,
So if you're Canadian, you want to go to a game in Florida when the Maple Leafs go down there
You have
for
to use a
game 3 and 4,
secondary-
they have to go to a secondary ticketing website.
oh my god, that's actually a nightmare. That's actually a nightmare for the Panthers to even have to do that.
I was gonna say,
It's kind of
I wonder what their home games are
your
gonna look
fan
like.
base, but it's hockey in Florida. Like I don't know what you can really expect.
Yeah, it's not very
Popular.
popular.
We see how popular the baseball teams are in Florida. I think a whole 20 people went to 2 games yesterday at
Yeah.
2 different stadiums.
Yeah, sports are clearly not at the top of Floridians' minds.
No, definitely.
Especially right now
No, definitely not.
when it's 85 down there.
It's 85 at least all year.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's ever really on their minds. But
Yeah.
it would be crazy if the Panthers did go on a run just because it would be such a shock. But that's hockey. Whoever's
Yeah.
hot in the playoffs typically does the best.
Yep.
Real quickly, I got a cool segue to Florida and sports. So Formula One is going to have a U.S. Grand Prix
Yes.
in Miami this weekend. Last weekend they had a Grand Prix in Baku. Not
Where?
exciting.
What?
Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan.
Where's that?
It's a Middle Eastern country,
Is
Asian
it-
country.
It's a country?
Europe, Middle
Yes.
East,
Oh, okay.
something like that.
Oh.
But Formula One is a
I'm sorry.
growing.
No, I honestly I didn't know if that was a city or a country. That's why I asked.
Baku's the city.
Oh,
for
okay.
sure.
Oh, it's okay.
So yeah, Formula One's a growing motorsport across America, really due to the Netflix series Drive to Survive.
Yes.
It is growing massively after I think now their 4th season just released in March, I believe. But yeah, this weekend the Miami Grand Prix will be on ESPN, probably around 1 p.m. Eastern time. Yeah, that's just my little cool segment to Florida sports.
Well, it's funny you
Do
mentioned
you have
that.
a pick?
A pick, well,
Yeah, go ahead.
for Formula One right now, it's being dominated by the team Red Bull. So it's definitely going to be either a Perez Verstappen 1-2 or a Verstappen Perez 1-2, just because they're purely so dominant in teams, and their car is just absurdly fast versus the rest of the competition. Like Ferrari and Mercedes and Aston Martin. Aston Martin, though, is having a great year compared to the last year. I think they finished like 6th or 7th in the standings, but now they're second place in the constructors standings, and yeah, they really turned it around.
Well, I was going to add before we close the show, I've gotten into F1 a little bit just because of a couple of my roommates who are big F1 fans. And it was, I guess, a little surprising to see that Perez won in Baku on Sunday, just because Verstappen's been dominating the race calendar. And now that I've learned that Perez is kind of this king of the streets, it's interesting because Miami's course and their track is kind of like a street track. So I wonder if Perez is going to continue this.
I think he has a good chance. I think he might have taken pole last year. I'm not sure. It was either him or no. What? No, I think it was Leclerc. But yeah, either one of
And
them.
Leclerc won pole for Baku this past weekend, I
Yeah.
believe.
It just shows how dominant that Red Bull car is.
I was going to say, I think Leclerc lost the lead on the second lap,
Yeah.
if I remember
Something
that
like
correctly. That's crazy.
Yeah, Red Bull's just miles ahead, and it's
Yeah.
kind of sucks to see because there's not a lot of great racing, at least for the lead. But yeah, this Miami Grand Prix will be, I think it'll be pretty exciting. It's a lot different of a course than Baku. Baku's a lot of long straights and just not excited. I didn't even wake up for that. Like, I was not excited for it.
Yeah, I think it started at 7 a.m. Eastern time.
Yeah,
But we'll see how F1 does in the US because there's only 3 US races this year, I believe. There's Miami, Austin, and I think they added a new one in
Yeah,
Las
Las Vegas.
Vegas. So we'll see how that goes because it's definitely not one of the more popular sports in the US. It's definitely very popular globally, but we'll see. I think it's growing a little bit.
it is growing.
How's my boy Lewis Hamilton doing? He owns the Broncos. He owns like a small.
That's
percentage
right.
of
I
them.
forgot about
Not
that.
gonna lie, not too hot.
Is he?
Mercedes-
He kind of got off to a slow start, which was kind of shocking.
Yeah,
He's
he's
too worried about Russ. That's why.
he had a slow
He's
start.
got his priorities
Yeah,
in the
he's
right
probably
place.
losing sleep over at night, seeing 242 million in the bank for Russell Wilson. Probably losing sleep. He can't even focus on Formula One.
I don't think he's won a race this year yet, right?
No, he didn't win, and he didn't win one last year, which leading
Right,
into
that was
last
the
year,
big storyline.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
had a win in every single season since it started.
All right, well, so he's a nightmare. Good to know.
All right, is there anything else you guys want to add? All right, well, thank you for listening. We will hopefully be back on Friday for another show. We will definitely try to make that happen, but thank you as always for listening and have a great rest of the week.